For this episode of Coffee with Closers, I'm sitting down with Kris Rudeegraap. He's the co-founder and CEO of Sendoso, the leading sending platform for sending direct mail and corporate gifts. During my conversation, Kris shared some practical advice for sales leaders and marketers on how to leverage gifts and direct mail as a way to increase engagement and response rate for your sales and marketing program. So stay tuned for my conversation with Kris.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Coffee with Closers, where business leaders share insights on how to build businesses from the ground up and best practices for innovating in their industry.
Hey Kris, I'm super excited to have you join me for this episode of Coffee with Closers.
Yeah, really glad to be here.
Most certainly. Well, every entrepreneur has a story of how they overcame obstacles to become an entrepreneur, and you have a pretty interesting story. From a very young age, you've been an entrepreneur. So you want to share a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, so I'd say I was kind of a born entrepreneur. I remember way back in the day, like selling mistletoe and hustling to make money. And then in college, started a company called All Student Rentals, which was a website for college students to find housing, pay their rent online, find roommates. Was able to get a little bit of funding from the university for that, and then ended up selling that to another company. Moved to San Francisco, worked in sales for about 8 years, and then started Sendoso.
Yeah, I mean that's crazy. You were actually still trying to build business while in school and trying to make some money on the side, and actually was able to exit off of that too. That's an interesting story.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun too because I was able to meet a lot of people and really learn a lot, almost like a university, in itself in terms of learning how to start a startup in college. That really paid dividends, and even took out a little bit of student loans to help fund it, which was kind of a scary moment, but it paid off.
Yeah, and so obviously you went from sales and to become an entrepreneur and started a business, and you're a sales professional, now a founder. So talk to us a little bit about that idea for Sendoso and how that came about.
Yeah, so after selling my first company out of college, I really realized that I didn't know enough to want to start another company, and I wanted to learn from other entrepreneurs. So sales came natural to me, and so I spent about a decade in software sales in San Francisco prior to starting Sendoso. And so while I was at one of my last companies at TalkDesk prior to starting, I found myself as a salesperson, and most people are, you're prospecting, you're trying to find new clients, you're trying to make current clients happy. And I would send out a gazillion emails and started wanting to get more creative, and I found myself writing handwritten notes, packing boxes of swag or printed collateral, or going on Amazon, finding quirky gifts and packing it up or repacking it up with a note and shipping it out. And it all worked really well. I just dreamed up of this one day. I had this dream of like, why can't I just click a button in Salesforce and someone sends it out for me? And so that was kind of the aha moment that led to the current day Sendoso, which, for those guests listening who don't know what Sendoso is, we're a sending platform that helps other companies send out, direct mail, corporate gifts, swag, handwritten notes, you name it, we can send it.
Yeah, so obviously, this concept is nothing new, right? Like everyone knows. I mean, in the past, the field reps would drop in and give some donuts or whatever the case might be. That's been around forever. But I think with us having more people doing inside sales, this is extremely important to have a technology like this to enable them to do more, right, with their day.
Exactly, and I think some of the added benefits that I saw was like you said, everyone was kind of doing this before. It was $100 billion industry. It was just offline and siloed, and so bringing in data into this, bringing in tracking into your CRM and other tools, bringing in workflow integrations into your marketing automation or your sales engagement tools, and being able to make it something that you can operationalize and do every day was kind of the aha moment. Instead of this was on your to-do list always, but it was just so much effort that it would always get pushed down. Like, okay, do I really want to write a handwritten note right now? Probably not. I've got something else to do. And so we tried to simplify it to a point where you could do it every day.
Yeah, so talk to us a little bit about, obviously you touched on, the tracking capabilities and things of that nature. And we know, every one of us gets a ton of emails and nobody really enjoys that, but everybody loves to get some sort of a gift, right?
Yep.
So how has, from your data that you've collected from having hundreds and thousands of companies using your platform and probably thousands of sales reps, so like the impact of having some sort of a, handwritten note or some sort of a gift, what kind of lift do they see from response rate, engagement, things of that nature?
Yeah, so we have some specific case studies. There's about 50 of them on our website if you want to read like what was sent, how it was sent, what's the results. And so I'd say that's where I can give you the exact specifics if you're curious. But in general, we see salespeople using it, to outbound, to set meetings, and depending on different scenarios, they're seeing a lift in their sequences that include something physical or some kind of digital gift. And we also see it into the customer lifecycle too, where customers are CSMs, account managers are using it too.
Yeah, and even I'm assuming even with employee onboarding too, right? Sending, especially if they're remote, being able to send them, press a button and have their swag sent to them before their start of date. Which can also be extremely useful in the HR department as well.
100%. And, I was in sales, so our first use case was sales related, but we saw a ton of organic usage around kind of the HR employee use case. And that has taken off as a huge thing, especially during COVID and everyone being remote.
So obviously you understood the need for salespeople having immediate access to being able to send gives. So how did this marketing evolution came into the picture with integration with marketing automation and based on deal stages, based on lead lifecycle stages or lead activities, being able to trigger certain sort of gifts and things like that?
Yeah. So, like I said, I was the original kind of buyer. I was kind of scratching my own itch as a salesperson. And we realized pretty quickly once we started selling the software that salespeople or sales leaders didn't always have budget. The other thing was we realized pretty early on that marketing historically might have done some sort of direct mail or gifting in like a batch CSV kind of attempt. And so while salespeople were our end users and still are, and there's tens of thousands of sales reps using our platform, we really realized that selling into marketers and having this kind of alignment where marketing could pick up some of the budget for it, they could control maybe some of the content or some of the items, but then let sales click and send was a winning solution. And so we go to market, we sell both into sales and marketing leadership, and it's a very in sync, really aligned strategy.
And I know, especially in the SaaS sector, this is a thing, right? They're always sending gives and swags, and all those things are very highly regarded as part of the marketing hacks. But not so in other industries like manufacturing and some of the other professions. Like this is kind of not a priority. So have you seen any trends in terms of the companies or industries that is adapting this sort of a model to kind of plug this into their marketing and sales ecosystem?
Yeah, so we've got real estate, banking, financial services, insurance. We do have some manufacturing. So I think that for more forward-thinking, SDRs and AEs and sales reps, they're bringing this into their outreach. And we also follow in the footsteps of the sales lofts and the outreaches who are modernizing the entire world's sales processes. And so because we integrate with them, because we partner and co-sell with them, their success equals our success too. And so they're modernizing the way salespeople engage. So that's been helpful for us too.
And Sendoso is not just a technology. There's a big behind-the-scene machine that has to operate to make all this work, right? Because you're actually hand fulfilling a lot of these parts and pieces that goes into boxes and being able to ship. So how did all of that orchestration come about when you built this company, especially as a startup, trying to build a technology company and then also having to address the logistics side of it?
Yeah, so you nailed a pretty important part that we're part software, and we had to build a world-class software and SaaS platform, and then we have this world-class logistics and fulfillment infrastructure too. So we operate some of our own warehouse facilities where we're kitting, we're storing, we're writing notes. We then have dropship partners and some other 3PLs worldwide. But yeah, there's a huge underlying fulfillment component. There's special software we've built just to help with that side of the house. And it's also one of our key advantages and something that's, hard to replicate. And as you alluded to in the early days, building software, you could just spin up another server. But for warehousing and physical space, we've had to continue to enhance our footprint of how our warehouses, work and the size of them. And so, our first warehouse was probably the size of a bedroom. Our current one is, the size of a football stadium. It's huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's the big, I guess the first mover advantage that you have, right? Someone else to come into this market, trying to replicate what you've done both on the technology and the logistics side, also to capture the market share it's a lot difficult to do. So that's always a good sector to be in, right? Where you have the protection to kind of own that market sector. And I don't think there's anybody else that actually doing. I mean, there's a lot of companies that do gifting, but nothing to the extent of what Sendoso is capable of doing.
Yeah,
from what I
exactly. There's some small companies out there that are trying to copycat us, but are maybe taking shortcuts or don't have the breadth of service or the offering or the marketplace selection. But there'll probably be more copycats as we continue to grow and scale, and people are, seeing this. It's though, like you said, it's hard to copycat because there is the physical logistics component mixed with the software component.
Most certainly. So how has it, like you said, almost a decade you spent in sales, and then you started this company. Now it's about 4 or 5 years going. So how has your approach on sales and marketing evolved as you got more experience and actually started your own company?
Yeah, so I think, seeing just sales and marketing in general evolve is something that, we try to be world-class in terms of how we drive our sales and marketing forward. I think some of the trends I'm seeing are around just the more alignment around marketing and sales and working together more than ever before, or software that helps people, work together better. So I think, Sendoso falls in that category where marketing and sales end up working together. Maybe sales become mini marketers at times. And I think, there's other software that bridges those together too, where, there's like the sales engagement software that marketing can chime in on with the SDRs in terms of, what's the content that should be in these outbound messages. There's, the enablement tools like HighSpot or Seismic, where you can marketing's, putting content in front of salespeople, and there's a collaboration. There's like the Gongs of the world where marketing can hear what salespeople are saying and update their messaging. So I think the sales tech and MarTech stack are converging more than ever before, and technology is making, the revenue team better versus, maybe 5-10 years ago, they were very siloed in their efforts.
Yeah, most certainly. And obviously with this, this fast moving change, there's companies have to adapt. And people having to, the field sales reps had to be inside sales reps, and they had to now start using CRM, and they couldn't drop off a box of, donut, and now they got to use technology, right? So all of this is actually kind of accelerating the entire industry as a whole from both sales and marketing side.
Exactly. I think salespeople are, like you said, with field sales and outside sales having to come inside, they've had to adopt technology. And so it's been overall, evolution of how sales has been around. But I think the same tactics of trying to build rapport, create a relationship, be personal, get creative, those like soft skills are ever important. And automation will never, completely kill creativity or completely kill this human rapport you're building. So it's like, what is the balance of using these interpersonal skills with software? And if you can get that right, you're going to be you're going to crush quota forever.
It's kind of like what, you all hear about ABM, right? Account-based marketing, but essentially account-based strategy has been around forever, right? Like from the old days of sales, that they were always looking at the named account and go to a territory and then hitting up those accounts. The strategy is somewhat all the same. The playbook is almost the same, but I think the time and time and technology has changed some of the approach in how we might execute some of those things.
Exactly.
So obviously, going from an individual contributor to leader to now founding your own company and now owning company vision, the raising capital, overseeing the growth of the organization and building team and having advisors. I mean, the role that you play today is completely different from what you had as a sales rep. So how did you prepare yourself to be able to undertake that sort of a big job?
I didn't. I just jumped in, learned by doing. But I would say that a sales background has proven super successful in certain parts of the business. So, we're about 450 employees now, and many of those employees, the majority of them, I've had a part in recruiting them. And I think that sales is, especially in the early days, you got to build that core team and continue to grow that team. And when you're just a no-name company, you've got to sell the vision, the dream to these new employees. So my sales background helped a ton in the recruiting and growing of our team. My sales background also helped a ton in terms of, venture capital, and we've raised 50 million plus in capital with more to come. And so that is something that as a salesperson, I treated that like a sales process. Got inbounds, I did some outbounds, I ran a demo per se, and even if I got a no, it didn't matter. I wasn't sales trained me to get some no's and get some yeses, and so I think that really helped me too, in terms of just being successful. And then our first customers, I think getting your first customers and starting to get traction and momentum. Being a previous salesperson really helped. It was a no-brainer for me to start outreaching to people day zero to get customers, and so that really accelerated our early traction too.
Yeah, and what other things are you doing in terms of personal development, right? Because I think leadership is something that we can, grow into, right? And especially when you're asked to do it, right, you have no other choice but step into that role. So are there things that you're doing proactively to kind of build your leadership skills and grow in areas that you may not have been strong in the past?
Yeah, one of the biggest things I did, and I started this about 3.5 years ago, is I put together this personal industry advisory group. And this group has CROs, CTOs, CEOs, et cetera in it. And really my goal was I wanted to surround myself with really smart people and surround myself with people that had great networks too. And so I put together this advisory group, and now this advisory group, I can, have as a sounding board for ideas. If we're taking initiatives, I can ask them for things, and it's also helpful for introductions or hiring. And so this advisory group, which is substantially more than most people think, there's 100 plus folks in this group, has just been incredibly helpful as I've scaled the company.
Can you speak a little bit about how you were able to formulate that? And is there kind of structure in how frequently you meet, or kind of the format of how those meetings go?
Yeah, so what I there's like an advisory agreement, and I, as a thank you, offer up some shares in the company. So that's kind of a typical formal advisory program that some people might do. I've formalized it more where I send out like a monthly update. With that update, I also then include a couple asks that are optional, and that's my typical cadence. Is once or twice a month. Prior to COVID, there was some like quarterly happy hours and get-togethers and dinners. Probably do a little bit more of that post-COVID, but ultimately, there's also some one-on-ones where, I might have an ask, and in that ask was like, hey, can you book time on my calendar if you're free to talk about, X, Y, Z? And so I'll be doing some one-on-one meetings or group meetings with advisors per that too. But it's, I think the difference is really, I saw it as a much larger group than maybe more people think, oh, I've got like 3 advisors, that's all I need. My goal is to have more of these micro advisors who could help once in a while, but didn't have to commit hours a day or hours a week. And it's been a great way for me to get exposure to many more people that have, niche expertise.
Do you, obviously thinking about giving away equity in your company that's actually fast growing, it's a big give. Even though it's not demanded of them to contribute as much. So, is there a time like, hey, if you don't contribute at all, your equity goes away or anything like that as a check and balance?
No, my buy-in with this is like, hey, I'm not asking for, maybe once every 6 months, maybe in 6 months, I have an ask where it's so important that their 10 minutes of their time is worth 10 years in learnings. So it's not necessarily about the quantity of involvement, but the quality of involvement. And I find myself trying to make that program to be more effective because it's not asking for so much. And if a couple of my advisors are, I don't hear from them for many months, it's not something that I worry about.
Makes sense. And obviously, like you've been at this for quite some time. You've started multiple companies and obviously a very successful tech company are you building. What's kind of the why behind what you do?
Yeah, so the why, I guess there's the why behind Sendoso, which was to really scratch an itch. And I saw a pain point. It was a huge, 100 billion plus market with, an offline solid world that needed software. And so I think all that is like the recipe for why companies usually get started, which is you're trying to solve a big problem in a big market. with a great business model. And so that culminated into why I started Sendoso. I think from an entrepreneur's perspective, like why I like entrepreneurship, I think it's part the challenge of like taking something from zero and scaling it out and everything that's going wrong. It's a very dynamic role, and every day is different. And then I think it's also, the end goal and the outcome of, wealth creation too. I think that's also, in my eyes, something that why I want to be a founder and an entrepreneur too.
So talk to me a little bit about, you've mentioned earlier, being in the sales role, you've been able to kind of sell the vision and things like that. What are some areas where you see entrepreneurs failing when they're communicating the vision to the company or able to get the team that they need to drive the growth that they need? Have you observed some obvious mistakes that entrepreneurs and leaders make?
Yeah, I mean, some things that come to mind. One might be over micromanaging and not delegating. I think some entrepreneurs fail to delegate early on. And, I always knew that my best job was to get to hire people that were better than me in everything else. Because I think as early founders, you're doing everything. And, best case scenario is I have no job left and everyone else is doing everything around me better than I could do. And I'm just leading that team and helping them. And I'm a resource for them. So I think, delegation and not delegating is a fail. I think two is meaningfully thinking about company culture is important too. I think, while can be something that you don't have time for, it's something that if you are a good entrepreneur, culture can help scale the company. And so I think some entrepreneurs maybe don't think about that. They're only focused on, their product. Maybe other failures is, not asking for help and just trying to learn. I think my advisor kind of group is one area where I ask for help in certain areas and I'm not a know-it-all. There's lots of things I don't know. And so the advisory group has helped with that. So some of the things that stick out in my head.
Yeah, I mean, if I can kind of ask some clarifying questions, because I think the first thing you talked about the delegation and obviously just kind of giving the responsibility, trusting people more than just micromanaging whether or not they're able to do that task. So which also kind of come into picture, especially as you're growing super rapidly, right? You went from like 0 to almost 500 employees in a span of like 2 or 3 years. So essentially when it comes to that, like systems, process, and very much methodical approach on how you solve different tasks and how you delegate certain work. How did you get started on that process? Because I think as a startup, as a founder, you're trying to have the vision for the product, you're trying to hire people, you're training people, you're also trying to raise capital. All of that. How did you even find the time or even the method to be actually start building some systems, process and checklists and things like that?
Yeah, so I think very early I was obsessed with Asana and kind of mapping everything out in terms of different departments or functional areas with backlog to dos. I think as a founder in the very early days when you maybe have 5-10 people, or even just 2 people, there's infinite things that you could do. And so, and that could overwhelm you. And so my strategy in the very early days was just okay, I'm just going to create 1 million tasks. I'm going to, chip away 10 of them today. And, that's it. I can go home, sleep, and do that, and just disconnect. And I think over time, then you find other people that you hire to do that, and they have their own processes of how they get work done. But I think it's really having an original process, and I think as you scale, it's learning other people how they've done it at past companies, and can you improve on your process, and collaboration, and as you scale, get better every day by doing that. Yeah, that was my approach, is just being very task management focused. And then I think as we scaled, getting good at hiring people, and then getting good at instilling collaboration and productivity, and having all hands and really continuing the vision to get everyone continue to be bought in on the bigger picture, but making sure that there's tools and software in place for them to be efficient in their kind of day-to-day getting things done, kind of blocking and tackling.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, I think early days is just overwhelming, especially as even in especially smaller, mid-sized organization. That struggle you never overcome that struggle, unless you're raising capital and hiring a lot of top talent to be able to fill in a lot of void that you as a founder cannot fill. So I think your point is extremely on point. The other question I think you mentioned about the culture, because I know we have everybody talk about culture, right? But practically living it out, and especially as the leader, right, you have to be the one kind of driving that culture, designing it, and then obviously seeing it come through. So are there any practical advice that you have making your culture something that every employee that really buys in and follows?
Yeah, so I think, there's a couple important things that we did early on and things that we're continuing to do. One is really try to promote a work-life balance. I know a lot of people say that, but, I lead by example. I'm not working like 20-hour days. We also very early on had this vacation bonus where if you take a vacation, we actually pay you money to take a vacation. And so that really instilled this, okay, I can't not, I'm going to lose money if I don't take a trip right, now. And so that really iterated this, and promoted this work-life balance. And so I think you can find, if you want to have a good work-life balance, prove it, and for us, it was paying people, money to take a vacation, and they posted a picture in a Slack channel, and we created this culture of get out, have fun with your family. So that was one of the things that we did there. I think there's, other things from an executive standpoint where, people feel like we're kind of one team, one dream. I might be working with an SDR one day trying to help them get a meeting, or the next day working with a product manager. As a leader, I'm not, too cool for school, so to speak. Where oh, what's the CEO doing? No one knows. So I even have a weekly, or now bi-monthly, all hands, where one of the topics is behind the CEO scenes. People are getting an insight to my day-to-day, and I think that instills this kind of more flat area, and I think that creates a culture of collaboration and a culture of people wanting to chip in more. And so those are some of the key things. I think we got lucky too in that our product is really fun, and people are sending piñatas and cupcakes and bottles of booze, and so our customers are smiling, sharing pictures, and so that product kind of fun outcomes have also made our company culture and our brand more quirky and fun, and I think that's something that we just saw in the early days and just doubled down on that as well.
Yeah, and I think, the tech SaaS industry really made this culture thing front and center for leaders today. Because I think, in the past, you work at an organization, they have this, organizational, whatever you want to call those, and you just culture code, but it never really was personified in anybody. Yep. But I think the SaaS companies are making that a reality. So obviously, as founders and as leaders, the one thing we don't have enough of is time. And so I'm curious to learn, what are some time hack that you have in terms of staying productive? Are there any specific, systems in place that you follow to get things done in your day?
Yeah, so I'm big on time blocking. I also use this tool called Clockwise that is super helpful in terms of calendar blocking. I think in terms of other things, I use this tool called Feedly that brings in all these blogs into once, and I can quickly read through my news. So I spend maybe 20 minutes in the morning, and that's helpful. I use Upwork quite a bit too. So really with that, if there's something that I feel like it's taking up too much of my time, or I need a VA to do something, I'm constantly looking for ways that I can make myself more productive by outsourcing to other people. I find myself using other tools even simple hacks like using Calendly instead of having to go back and forth for 3 minutes or 5 minutes to find a time, or using Loom to record a quick video response to make sure I get the right message across versus 5 emails, or I use a tool called Atext, which I can there's one called Text Expander, same thing, where if there's things like dropping in a typical email message, I have 50 things I just copy and paste them in a minute. So I think, long story short, there's a lot of little mini tools out there to make you more effective, and all of those together make you way more effective.
Yeah, the funny thing is, every sales leader that I've ever asked this question, time blocking was their number one thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a sales, right? Because they block their time for calls, and then for follow-ups, and for meetings. So I think that's just a universal method for sales leaders.
I agree. I think I learned it in sales, and it transformed the way I act as a CEO and leader.
Yeah, and I think also it kind of eliminates the going after the urgent over the important, right? So if you already scheduled in the time for the important things, then the urgent won't overtake that, and then kind of derail you from actually focusing on what's most important. And I liked what you said about Upwork. So do you actually have like an executive assistant on top of that? You also need assistants to get things done, or because I heard you mention about using VA to do certain tasks.
Yeah, so right now I actually don't have an executive assistant that I personally use, but I have virtual assistants that do a lot of different tasks for me that are more one-off. And I found that using all these different tools has been extremely effective in terms of how I manage my day too.
Yeah, and I was just curious because I know sometimes explaining something before you delegate can actually take up more time than sometimes you're just doing. So I don't know how you weigh the option and say, well, this is probably better me just taking 10 minutes, create a video, assign it to somebody than actually trying to do this.
That's kind of my take too, is like there's a little hesitancy for me to get an AA because it's just like a middle person that will then have to take one step further. And so, but I think there's EAs can be super helpful in some areas, and that can really help you with scheduling and other things that, maybe still take up time but I'm, cautious that I'm spending too much time on.
Most certainly. So obviously, you're an entrepreneur. Probably a lot of people that can follow you on LinkedIn and see what you do, and obviously finding inspiration from Sendoso and what you've built so far. What advice do you have for other aspiring entrepreneurs?
I mean, if you're an aspiring entrepreneur and you haven't made the jump, like jump today. Like there's no better time. I'd say also if you can, hack things together in your night and weekends in the early days to try to drive yourself closer to launch, I think that's a benefit too. I'd say build a network of advisors. In some cases, I've seen a quote where it's like, it's not what you know, but who you know. And so I really believe in the power of a network and advisors. And then lastly, just like have fun doing it. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And so make sure you have fun while you're building.
Yeah, and I think it's also kind of seeing the problems, right? Real problems that people have and then trying to solve it. Because I think your story of how you try to hack up a software that would, order something for people when, place an order through Salesforce. I don't know if you know TK from ToutApp. He had a very similar story too. He had a product, but that wasn't really getting much traction. So he had to build an email outreach tool to tell people about the product that he was building. Then ToutApp actually became his product. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. And I think the best products are solving pain points that people have, and you can become passionate about it. And yeah, I totally agree. Manny from Outreach has the same story. He was actually in the recruiting business, and he wanted to build a tool that can actually do outreach to candidates at scale. And then now it turned into this mega sales outreach technology.
Yep.
Completely wasn't what was designed originally to do. Interesting story. So obviously, knowing what you know today, what advice would you give your younger self?
I guess my younger self I would say just do what you got to do. I think my younger self always dreamed big. And so I would say just, dreaming big. I'm extremely happy and fortunate to where I am today. So I don't think I would change anything. But when I was younger, my mentality was, be an entrepreneur, think big, and it'll all work out. And I think, it's working out great. And so that's the kind of my mental approach back in the day is paying off today.
Awesome. Well, Kris, I certainly appreciate your time, and thanks for what you're offering to the sales and marketing ecosystem out there. And wish you all the best, and hope to stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much. And for listeners that want to chat with me further, get in touch. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn or email me at Kris. It's KRIS@sendoso.com.
Awesome.
This episode of Coffee with Closers is brought to you by One IMS, a leading digital marketing agency helping businesses win new customers. To request a free marketing ROI audit, please visit oneims.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.